Great. Thank you so much for that story, Carmen. That was wonderful. Next, we're going to go to Deborah Hutchinson. And Deborah is a disabled military veteran who's using this platform to advocate for those suffering from trauma due to military sexual assault. This is Deborah's story.
There are certain sounds one never forgets. Some sounds are happy sounds, babies saying their first word, the sound of laughter. Some other sounds, not so much. I heard my life-changing sound on April 24th of 2017. Cha-chunk! The sound of two heavy metal doors shutting and locking behind me. I hear a stern male voice next to me bark, "Wait here." I can smell the odor of industrial cleaner in the air. It's making me nauseated. I scurry over to a corner nearby. I press my shaking body as close as humanly possible against the cold, dull, gray concrete wall behind me. I am trying to disappear. Something has gone horribly wrong. In the background, I can hear people talking. They sound a million miles away, muffled by all the thoughts slamming and spinning through my mind. I don't understand what's happening. I came here for help. I told them the memory of a 12-hour rape and torture was coming back. I told them what happened to me when I was in the military 30 years ago. I told them what my supervisor did to me. I told them how scared I was. I came here pleading for help with this nightmare that has consumed me. They promised to help me. They said this is the safest place for me. This doesn't feel safe. This doesn't feel like help. I can't look up. Not yet. I'm too scared. I'm too confused. I focus on my shoes. They are all that I have left of what once was me. They're sensible walking shoes that most 50-year-old professional women would wear. They're black with silver stripes. Except now, my shoes have two large gaping wounds where my laces used to be. I don't understand. I'm not suicidal. I just want help. I can feel the harsh, scratchy polyester material of the faded red clothes they gave me to wear, rubbing unpleasantly against my skin. They have stripped everything from me, but what is left of my shoes? Even my water bottle was taken from me. I'm so thirsty. My mouth is so dry. I still can't look up. I'm frozen in place like a forgotten statue while a different world spins out of control around me. Beyond my wounded shoes is an off-white cheap tile floor. There's a large chip missing out of the tile next to my right foot. I stare intently at that gaping wound in the floor for what feels like eternity. I need perspective. I dig down deep to find the strength to look up. Slowly, I raise my gaze, leaving the comfort of the now familiar chip in the tile. My eyes lock into what is directly in front of me. It looks like a day room. Heavy wooden chairs arranged in pods of 4, most likely bolted to the floor. They have thin red cushions that are expected to make the chairs more inviting, more comfortable. They're failing miserably. I can almost see the filth radiating off them, the dark stains on them, giving the appearance that they were once part of a crime scene. On the far wall, mounted up high, too high for anyone to reach, was a TV. There's a protective mesh over the screen. Shouldn't they be protecting me, not a TV? The volume was set to extra loud and irritating. The channel was tuned into a chaotic daytime program. people yelling, throwing furniture at each other. Some older man named Jerry is the host. What are these people wearing? What kind of hairdo is that? I have to tear my attention off the TV. It's like watching a train wreck, yelling, chaotic behavior. Over in the corner, just to the right of the TV, is a neglected bookshelf. Some of the shelves are broken, trying to support the pile of sad, unwanted books that have been tossed carelessly onto them. Some of the books are missing covers. Some are torn in half, tattered, broken, forgotten. I know how those books feel. Slowly, my gaze falls onto the people in the room. Oh, dear God, no. I see before me a room full of men. I have been locked in a psych ward full of men, military men. I feel as though I'm being shoved into my worst nightmare. I feel my blood run cold. My last breath is caught in my tight chest somewhere between inhale and exhale. My feet are cemented to the floor. My insides have turned to liquid. I am frozen by fear. I can't move. I can't breathe. I can't make sense of what is happening to me. My mind is reeling, twisting, turning, splitting in half. A million thoughts are ricocheting, spinning back, slamming into me at 30 million miles an hour. The pain is so intense. The now familiar cold hand of fear is creeping its way up my body, working its way slowly, painfully up, working its way around my throat, cruelly stifling the scream building up inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. But no scream comes out. I will my mind to work. I will my body to move. I don't want to die from this all-consuming fear that has invaded my body and my mind. The realization of the situation washes over me like a cold bucket of ice water. I came here for help for my military sexual trauma that happened 30 years ago by a superior during 12 hours of guard duty. Once again, just like 30 years ago. Help did not come then either. Help is not coming. Help is not coming. I could feel me, the true me, the mother, the daughter, the social worker, the sister, the friend, begin to fade away. A different part of me starts to take over, shutting down all non-essential human functions, shutting down all feelings, except fear. She stays. She has made herself a home deep inside me. I think she will be here for a while. My hearing has become supersonic. I hear every sound, every word spoken. My eyes miss nothing. My body is no longer liquid. It has become cold and hard inside. I must survive. I will have to fight for my life and my sanity while being locked away in a military psych ward full of men, while living my worst nightmare in my effort to find help. If I don't fight, Deborah disappears.
Thank you, Deborah. So next up, we've got Susie Parks. Susie has recently retired and she moved from Boston to New Mexico just in time for COVID. She's been experimenting with different hobbies, including storytelling ever since. This is Susie Parks.
I grew up on a dead-end street with lots of kids of all ages. My girlfriends and I played together almost every day, but although I had friends growing up, I never really had a best friend until high school. In home ec class, I shared a sewing machine with a classmate named Henrietta Sanchez. We didn't really see each other outside of school until one day I saw her younger sister, Faye, being surrounded by 3 older and larger girls who seemed to be harassing her. As I got closer to this little group, I could see that Faye looked nervous, and although I was a skinny little kid, I grew up with 2 brothers and I wasn't afraid of anyone. I marched in the middle of this little group, putting my arm around Faye's shoulders and said, "What's going on here?" I could feel the relief come from Faye, as well as apprehension from the other girls. I think they didn't quite know what to do. I quickly turned to Faye and said, "Henrietta and I were looking for you. Come on, let's go find her." And the 2 of us walked away. Now, the very next day, Henrietta invited me to her home for dinner that weekend. And when I walked into her front door, her grandmother came rushing over, put her arms around me, and gave me a big hug. Because she only spoke Spanish, Henrietta had to translate. She was thanking me for protecting Faye. And from that day forward, I had a best friend and I was accepted into that big, loving family. And for a while, everything went fine until one day, my father found out that I'd been sneaking out to date a Mexican boy. Now, my father was, until the day he died, a racist. But we lived in a really small town and half the kids were Mexican. So I never really understood why he had moved back to that town where he grew up after he left the Navy. Why didn't he just move someplace else or even stay in San Diego? My father was also a fairly violent man, and when he discovered my secret, he whipped me with a belt and then forbid me to see the boy or Henrietta because he figured it was her fault that I'd started dating a Mexican boy. Of course, I didn't really stop seeing either of them right away, but it became more and more complicated. And so even though I'd been able to stand up to some bullying teenagers for Faye, I wasn't powerful enough to stand up to my father's racism. I finally backed down, stopped dating the boy, and I really only saw Henrietta at school. I didn't know when or if I would ever find a best friend again. Where is she? We're supposed to open the doors in 15 minutes. Who does she think she is, making everyone else wait? Now, although I'd never met him, for such a small man, Chef-Mouthed Jerry had a very loud and somewhat upset edge to his voice. I glanced over at the table next to me, reading the ID sign. Maison Robert, pastry chef Lee Napoli. "I have no idea, chef. I've never met her," I replied. I didn't voice what I was actually thinking. "Geez, chef, a little hello, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today." It would have been a better introduction, whatever. Truth was, I didn't personally know most of the competitors today. I spotted some pastry chefs from a couple of hotels, a lot of high-end restaurants, and a few smaller ones that I was familiar with. At Le Méridien Hotel event, I was hoping to make some professional connections. From the moment I walked in, I was not only invigorated, but I was nervous. Being invited to participate in the James Beard Undiscovered Pastry Chefs of Boston event meant that I had reached some level of professionalism. But I also wanted to stand out. This was the first time I would be representing my own business, Wedding Angels, custom-made wedding cakes and dresses. For this event, I'd not only made a new display cake using a technique of draping so that the frosting looked like fabric, I'd also made a new chef's coat, white silk cutaway tux with tails and a mandarin collar. No one else would have anything like it. Just as Chef-Mouthed Jerry turned and stormed away, a red-headed whirlwind blew in. Catering cart loaded with plastic tubs, quart containers, pastry bags, squirt bottles, serving utensils, and a huge floral bouquet tucked under one arm. As she began to unload, Chef-Mouthed Jerry reappeared and started in on her. "Chef, you're late. Everyone else is ready. I was just getting ready to remove your table. We cannot open the doors until everyone is all set. You need to get everything in shape right now." As he was raving, Chef Napoli was calmly prepping her table. With literally 2 minutes to spare, she had her table completely assembled. She had obviously done this more than once. And as she tied her hair back, she turned to me. "Hi, I'm Chef Napoli. Love your jacket. Looks like we're playing with the big dogs today. But did Chef-Mouthed Jerry need to bark at me so loudly?" In the few minutes before our guests arrived to sample our desserts, Chef Napoli and I had bonded by dishing on Chef-Mouthed Jerry. And just like that, I no longer blamed her for getting me into trouble with him. As the event finally started to wind down, chefs began to wander around talking and tasting each other's selections. And as Chef Napoli bit into my white chocolate passion cake, she rolled her eyes. Oh my God, this is delicious. And it's so light. How about getting a drink when we're all cleaned up here? As we sipped our cocktails and discussed our professional lives, we ultimately realized that each of us craved more professional interactions. It took a couple of months, but we finally decided to start an organization so that we could get to know our fellow pastry chefs. We organized the Professional Pastry Guild of New England, and then we put our heads together to find a solid board of directors. And it wasn't long before we got a call from the James Beard House in New York City, inviting our board of directors to host their Mother's Day brunch. This was kind of privileged, but it also meant an immense amount of work and a logistical nightmare. Hosting an event at the James Beard House meant that we had to decide on the menu, we had to choose our presentation china, solicit all of the food and the drink, prep everything, pack everything and everyone into the 2 vans we'd rented, and drive from Boston to New York City. Now, if you've never been to the James Beard House in Lower Manhattan, it actually was the townhouse where James Beard lived and taught his cooking classes. Events begin as you enter through the basement kitchen, which adjoins an interior sunroom, and then you proceed upstairs to the dining room. We wanted an immediate impact, so as you walked through the kitchen, you passed a 16-foot long table lined with glistening red bowls, which looked like glass. They were actually hand-blown sugar, little bowls which would hold our first course, a chilled crab and cucumber soup. They were a huge hit. Now, it took everything we had to pull off an event so smoothly that the Beard House manager actually complimented us at the end of the event, saying that it was one of the best prepared and most enjoyable crews that he'd experienced at the JB House. Evidently, he had some pull with the James Beard Foundation, because within the year, we got another invitation, this time to be one of the pastry chefs participating in the James Beard Awards dinner, which is a bit like the Academy Awards for culinary professionals. And this year, they were commemorating our Cambridge mentor, Chef Julia Child. This event was even more posh. They flew us to New York. They picked us up at the airport, provided our hotel rooms, invitations to pre-event dinners and parties, as well as invitations from several of the New York City participating restaurants who were holding post-event parties. Now, we decided against using the regular 4-inch square little china plates. Our dessert would be served in a red wine goblet, holding one of Julia Child's favorite cakes, a chocolate reine de Saba, in a small pool of a rich port wine sauce. There wasn't a lot of time to prep at the Marriott Hotel kitchen where we would create our garnish, which was little chocolate butterflies attached to the handle of a dessert fork. It was meticulous work. First, you have to pipe each individual wing and let them set up, then pipe a small dab of chocolate on the end of the fork, take 2 of the butterfly wings and angle them on the fork and hold them still until the chocolate sets up. We made 250 of these for our table and 50 for backup. Satisfied with our work, we left the kitchen and went back to the hotel to prepare ourselves for the evening. Coming back, we had to check in with the executive chef before heading up to our table. And as we entered the kitchen, the rather large man came striding over with his sous chef hot on his heels. His face immediately collapsed and he hung his head. He said, "I hate to tell you this, but our dishwasher mistook your forks for dirty dishes," and he put them in the dishwasher. Chef Napoli and I were confused. What do you mean, chef? How could that happen? She turned to me, "What are we going to do? We don't have time to replace anything." The disappointment and frustration grew, and she became more upset. And then there was an uncomfortable pause before their faces turned to smiles, and they both burst out laughing. No. Don't worry, it's all okay. We're just messing with you. Your pretty little butterflies are all upstairs waiting at your table. They both laughed, turned on them, go back to their duties, slapping each other on the back. And by gracefully accepting that we were the butt of their joke, we were now a part of their kitchen. When we recognized our table by the rows of goblets with butterflies fluttering above them, we knew we had done well. And I felt honored as I stood in line waiting to be introduced on stage with the likes of chefs Thomas Keller, Jacques Pepin, and Jean-Georges. I had made some connections, but I was even more proud that even though I didn't win that first competition, I won the best prize of all. A professional collaborator, a mentor, and my best friend, Lee Napoli.
Thank you so much. That's just wonderful. Thank you so much, Susie. All right, so next up we have Amy Burrell, and Amy's a former healthcare professional turned speaker and writer. Amy's work focuses on assisting women in owning and embodying their untapped innate power. Today, she's performing an excerpt from her memoir, Flipped Out, Stories from My So-Called Bipolar Life. This is Amy Burrell.
3 a.m. some morning in New Orleans, 2009. Roller coaster of love, say what? Roller coaster, woo-hoo. This night is like a roller coaster, baby, yeah. What is that heat? What the heck? It's in my stomach, it's in my gut. It's like I'm being eviscerated with a blowtorch. And the pressure, so much pressure in my head, about to explode. My brains feel like a motorboat in overdrive. Boom. But in my head, and what was that music? Who was singing? Oh, blah dee, oh, blah da, life goes on. Ah, stop! In the name of love. Oh, hell, it's me. Oh, hello, it's me. Stop. Go to sleep. That could work. No, lay me down to sleep. Oh, bless my soul, Lord, if you ever should die. Huh, that's the ticket. There's always the butcher knife. Or Bernie's got a gun. The whole world's come undone. Everybody is on the run. Amy's got a gun. Oh, no, 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 no. Let's try something else. I stumbled out of my bed, down the hall to the bathroom, flipping on the light, making sure not to be too shocked at my horrifying, demonic-looking reflection. I decided to ask her thoughts on the subject. So what do you think? Should we add another round of snake oil to the cocktail? But she maintained silence. You got nothing for me? Damn you. Guess I'm on my own here. That'll either do it or me. A few minutes passed with no relief. Then out of nowhere, Little Miss Night of the Living Dead chimed in from the mirror. Bitch, don't forget the code Jetton, because if you do, you're gonna start rolling. It speaks. Okay, thanks. The state of mania lasted another 45 minutes to an hour. And then it came slowly, smoothly, slithering up my spinal column to my neck. With its indescribable, even otherworldly electrical charge as it traveled up over my skull to my forehead, hovering over my third eye, like a cobra. As it works its magic, this little blue and white beauty geodon never fails to deliver. But this time it was so much worse. Oh no. Maybe I outdid it. Oh my God. Did you get the memo about dying? Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. So imagine, if you will, this was my brain on a state-of-the-art drug named Geodon. It was a major tranquilizer used for the treatment of bipolar disorder. I had already taken the max dose for the night, but as you can see, it made me worse. So in a state of desperation, I took another. 2 days later, 5:45 a.m., in bed, it's pitch black as I'm waking up. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Oh, yeah. I can hear your heart. Guess I'm still alive. What is this? Everything is so dark and thick and heavy, like some kind of bizarre sorrow infused molasses straitjacket. Oh, depression. You're such a relentless stalker, staking your claim yet again, always trying to seduce me with your sick brand of charm. I can't fight you today. So how long do you plan to stay this time? But the house is empty today. Excellent. Once free from the straitjacket of despair, I grabbed my always handy butcher knife from my night table. I was feeling kind of numb, and now literally went into an autopilot, like some kind of predatory robot on a mission. Then I was finally overcome with a weird sense of pleasant anticipation and a little extra energy to get the job done. Oh, beautiful knife. Look at you. Sharp, even sexy with your blade. I am no match for you. So what'll it be? Arm or solar plexus? Solar plexus. Okay. Oh. Insert swiftly under the sternal notch to cleanly dissect the aorta. It should do. Okay. One last prayer. Forgive me for what I'm about to do. Music? Stairway to heaven? What? Putting down my knife, I went down to the living room to find my nephew sitting on a chair playing Stairway to Heaven on acoustic guitar. There was a single beam of light streaming into the room, highlighting his sweet, innocent baby face. He looked, dare I say, angelic. Saying to him in my best, everything is okay voice. Hey, hon, your dad isn't here today. He smiled softly and said, I know, Mimi, I'm here for you. And in that moment, my heart area was swept up into a warm, tingly tsunami of pure peace and love. My eyes began to well up with tears as I walked to the kitchen, knowing that my mission was to be aborted. Then the dam broke, blinding me with a waterfall of salty tears flowing freely for the first time ever. Somehow, the voodoo spell cast upon my psyche, known as manic depression or bipolar, was somehow miraculously transformed by that massive purge, I could feel myself becoming lighter and more alive with each breath and each tear. I knew in a moment of welcomed clarity that none of it was me. It was actually the medications designed to save me. One thing I know for sure, medicine didn't heal me. No program healed me, but rather the power of love. And in the famous words of the Beatles, all you need is love. Wah, 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 wah. All you need is love. Wah, 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 wah.
Thanks so much, Amy. That's great. Again, remember, folks, that you can leave your positive feedback in the chat. We love hearing from you because these are such wonderful stories, and how they impact you. Well, you're the reason we're doing them. So please leave anything you feel like you want to about how this has positively impacted you. Next up, we have Pam. Pam Coates is a professional woman. She worked as a professional woman from 1977 to 2019, and she stood up for herself until she was in a position to stand up for other women. This is Pam Coates.
Well, we have to hire a woman. And so far, you're the best one we found, so you'll probably get the job. This was after an hour-long interview with the national sales manager for a division of a huge national hospital supply corporation. It was my first interview for a job out of college, and I thought, wow, that was such a strange thing for him to say. I wonder if that could be considered sexual harassment. Turns out, it wasn't even close. This company had developed a system for feeding patients who were hospitalized and weren't able to eat because of their disease state. And this system could feed them through the vein. It's called total parenteral nutrition. And now it's common therapy, but then it was brand new. And this company had the idea that if they hired people like me with a nutrition degree and an outgoing personality, that we could sell doctors on the concept of trying it. And it worked. We sold trainloads of product, but more importantly, we saved countless lives. I loved this job. Not only did I get a good salary and a company car and a $2,000 a week expense account, but I got to talk about the importance of nutrition all day, every day. It was wonderful. The part that wasn't wonderful and was totally unexpected was the rampant sexism and sexual harassment. There were the doctors that would look out over their crowded waiting rooms filled with representatives from various companies and say, loud enough for everybody to hear, I'll see the woman. That would be me, because there were no other women working in that particular arena in those days. There was very few women involved in the whole industry. And the first time a doctor said to me, I'm happy to talk to you, but do you mind waiting in my office till I'm done seeing all my patients? I thought that was a totally acceptable request. And so I said, of course, I'd be happy to wait. And after everybody had left and he walked in the office and he sat in his chair on his side of the desk, got this really kind of evil looking smile. And I started in on my presentation, and about 10 minutes in, he leans in and he says, so when are you going to show me how badly you want me to buy your products? On the inside, I felt like I was going to throw up. And I thought, what? What is wrong with you? Ugh, no, that is never going to happen. But on the outside, I maintained my professionalism. Not so much because I felt afraid of him. I didn't. He just didn't seem threatening. He just seemed creepy. But I thought, I don't want him to ever tell anybody anything negative about me that would hurt my career. So I'm going to hold my stuff together. So I very calmly said, I'm not here for that. But I'm going to leave the rest of this information here for you, and I'm going to gather my things and I'm going to go now. Have a good evening. And I marched out of his office, got in my car, felt relieved that I'd gotten out of there with my dignity intact, and thought, won't ever do that again. But the strangest thing that happened to me was in the basement at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, Texas. The pharmacy was in the basement then, and as you can imagine, there were a lot of patients at MD Anderson that couldn't eat because of their disease state, so they used a lot of our products. And I was down there pretty frequently, and I knew those pharmacists, and I thought we were buds. And one day, one of them, a really large man, a good 2.5 times my size, sees me walking down the hall, and he grabs me, throws me up against the wall, and starts groping me. I felt a rage in me that I did not know even existed. Without even thinking, I shoved my knee up in his groin, at the same time pushed him away from me and said, "Get the fuck off of me. Who do you think you are? Don't you ever touch me again. And if you do, I'll report you." I gathered up my stuff and I marched out of there with just adrenaline pumping through my veins. So angry. And I thought, God, what do I have to do? How small do I have to get? How invisible do I have to get for men to stop treating me like this? I was so furious. And I thought, this goes on all the time, and nobody seems to care. And even if I wanted to report him, there's nobody to tell. Nobody. Ironically, 15 years later, I became the person that people could tell. A corporate training and development job morphed into the head of human resources for a privately owned mid-sized company. And in the 25 years that I had that position, there were a number of sexual harassment cases. And in every case, the person accused of sexual harassment never admitted that they had done it, including the guy who had ink on his hands, grabbed a woman in the front of her shirt, left handprints in front of witnesses. Even he denied it. Him, we could fire right away because, so obvious. But everybody else were secretive, was behind closed doors, was not people you would ever suspect, not the boisterous, loud kind of person, but stealthy, secret, hiding, almost never in front of witnesses. So we had a procedure we followed, very appropriate, very legally sound. Each person was interviewed and we went through the whole incident. We wrote it all up. And in every case, we would tell the person accused of sexual harassment, if you ever retaliate against this person, if you talk about this outside of this room, or if you're ever accused of sexual harassment again in this company, they're all grounds for immediate termination. And in every case, the accused harasser found a way to leave the company within 2 to 3 months. And I concluded that there are just people who believe they're entitled to act that way. And they look for places where they can get away with it. And although things are so much better than they were when I first got out of college, it still goes on. And it's up to all of us to not let people get away with it, because the truth is, nobody deserves to be treated that way. Nobody.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Pam. Next, our next storyteller is Marianne Newworth, and Marianne's a nature lover who earned her BS in occupational therapy. Let me get a spotlight here. and she has a master's and a PhD in speech communication. She's been teaching communication courses and seminars for over 25 years, and she currently teaches at Stanford University. In her free time, Marianne enjoys practicing yoga, hiking, playing Frisbee, visiting with friends and family, eating chocolate, and engaging in any activity related to water, excluding drowning. This is Marianne.
It was an accident. He is deaf, so he didn't hear the warning shouts. As one of the camp staff most inclined towards shenanigans, it was very fitting that he is the one who backed the van into the cement gold-painted Sentinel lion and broke it completely in half. In the interest of high drama and fake grief, we organized a funeral for the broken lion. We all wore black, sang hymns, said prayers, and put the flag at half-mast. The teens loved it. It's strange to think that little did we know that in 3 weeks, the flag would be at half-mast for real, and that we were practicing for the actual grief to come. I knew I wanted to work at a camp that summer. Working with others outdoors can be so transformative. I applied to be the outdoor skills director for a camp that served kids with disabilities. They were of all ages and all different kinds of disabilities. I got the job and I ran the high ropes course, I taught rock climbing, and I did a wide variety of other activities. The kids were so cute. We had one camper who would get really close to us and go, "Counselor, counselor, I love you." And then we had another one who would walk up to us and say, "I got something in my eye. I got something in my eye." And we'd say, "Nate, it's your finger." And he'd go, "Oh," but then he would do it again. We had a Christmas dance in July. We held carnivals, we had mud fights. We enjoyed just the wonder and beauty of the nature all around us. We learned ASL and the importance of beautiful friendships and the wonder of the stars in the night sky. My fellow staff members were among the best that anyone could ever hope for. Gail was the nature activities director. She was a gentle soul and she loved the kids. On one hike that we had planned together, she came across cow prints in the mud. The kids were mesmerized. Without hesitation, Gail said, "These look like the prints of a purple-sided mattress thrasher." The kids and I oohed and awed. On another hike, Gail's calm, loving kindness and presence of mind shone through when we found a dead duck. The kids were frightened, but Gail gently picked up the duck and she held it in her hands. While she showed it to the kids, she said, "Look, this is death." And she explained what death is, how it happens, and that one does not have to be afraid. I loved working with Gail. She had such a kindness to her. One afternoon, I was sitting on one of the tables in the main dining area, and I was having a bit of a rough day. Gail sat down about 3 feet away, and she asked me if I was all right. I let her know I was having kind of a rough day, and she slid down the table playfully, bumped into me, and asked, "Would you like to tell me about it?" Have you ever felt really listened to? Have you ever felt really heard? Gail was the best listener, and I will never forget that moment. One of the most extravagant activities that we all planned was organizing a grand treasure hunt. Gail and I organized an opening act where I played Clancy, the miner, who had a beard, a walking stick, and a great hat. We placed towels covered in baby powder in a crawl-through space by the fireplace. I patted it as I crawled through to create smoke and the illusion that I was coming from the past. The kids were just so excited and transfixed. Gail asked me if I knew anything about hidden treasure. I said, I might. Would you all like a treasure map?" And the kids all yelled, "Yeah!" So I produced a treasure map to a trail that we'd already marked, and we had placed gold painted rocks all along the trail. And at the very end, we had painted a gigantic watermelon gold. So the kids felt they'd really hit the gold mine when they found that. But don't worry, we didn't let them eat it. Many of us came and went during the summer. We had to go to family weddings. There were other things that we had to attend to. And on one such occasion, I picked up a staff member from the airport after she returned from a short trip. And in what turned out to be a very eerie premonition, she asked me haltingly, "Has there been a tragedy at camp?" And I was surprised. And I said, "Well, no, not since the Great Lion loss." She was relieved, but not settled. It was the night before the day that changed everything. One of our favorite activities at camp was the hayride. I usually drove the tractor that pulled the hay wagon the kids rode in. We used a designated road and it was bumpy. Midsummer, right after picking up my friend from the airport, I had an opportunity to lead the kids on a big hike. And the day that I was packing, someone else drove the tractor. Everything was laid out on my bed, ready to be placed meticulously into my backpack. Then something happened that just exploded my sense of universal order and justice forever. I heard shouting and commotion down in the main hall, so I rushed down there. One of my friends was on the stairs and she was ashen. All color had completely left her face. She was shaking. I embraced her and asked her if she was okay. She just shook her head and she stammered, "There's been an accident." "What happened?" She said, "Gail, the hay wagon, she fell. We couldn't help it. The wagon ran over her." I stopped. I stopped all movement. Hesitatingly, fearing the truth, I asked, "Is she going to be okay?" My friend just shook her head. And gravity increased its hold on me. I noticed that my friend had blood on her. I found out later that she had attempted to do CPR on Gail, but her injuries were too severe. The kids streamed into the hall. Everyone spread out. There was a feeling of disorder and disarray. We heard sirens in the distance. The police came and asked necessary but incredibly painful, fact-based questions that no one should have to answer at a time like this. The questions just pierced our soul as their inquiry unfolded in the face of the worst tragedy that any of us have ever experienced. I agreed to walk with the tractor driver to the site of Gail's death to answer the police officer's continuing questions. There was a large brownish red stain in the dirt. It was an agonizing moment. It was surreal. I thought of the duck that Gail had found. And then I noticed that the air was silent, absolutely silent. No birds were singing as they always did. Not one bird. We had called Gail, Gail Bird. I realized all of nature was grieving. All of nature sensed the loss and was in shock. Within an hour, the skies opened in great heaving sobs, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained. Back at camp, it was strange to go into Gail's room and see all of her belongings. They all seemed hollow now. Another staff member and I drove her black VW Bug to her funeral. Afterwards at her house, I noticed that Gail had a Bible next to her bed, and in it she had highlighted all of these passages that spoke of listening. There were bird feathers inside the Bible. Next to it, there was a cactus branch with a blue ribbon woven around it. The nuance, the blue, the listening, it all sank into my center. And in that moment, I resolved to be a better listener, to be a better person. We all wore white to Gail's funeral. On the drive back to camp, our director spontaneously pulled over at a park, and we ventured into the sun and onto the soft grass. We took off our shoes and we danced. We cried, we twirled, we did the polka and walked on the grass in our bare feet. We sang and we signed the camp song. With each other's company, we managed to move forward. We let go. We moved on. We healed. Because of Gail, I'm a better listener. And because of Gail, I'm a softer, kinder, and gentler human being. And because of Gail, I know the value of true friendship. And now, whenever I see Cement Lions, I think of that summer and how Gail lives on through me.
Thank you so much, Mary Ann. Thank you so much. So our next storyteller is Mark Sotkin. Now, Mark has written and produced shows for every major network. He was the head writer for the hit shows Laverne and Shirley and The Golden Girls. We're lucky to have him in Santa Fe. He now creates content for his website, marksotkin.com, and that's MarkSotkin.com. And this is Mark Sotkin.
When your secretary tells you that the president of Paramount Television wants to see you in his office right away, you go. So I rushed across the studio back lot, but kind of in a run walk. I did not want massive pit stains when I got there. I hightailed it down Old Western Street, firing my fake six-shooter at a network censor who believed that saying fart on television would end civilization as we know it. Passed by the huge water tank where naval battles were usually shot, also a great place to drown the writer who handed in a script so lame we'd have to eat it. Down New York Street to the executive building, where the suits hunkered down away from the creatives. I did feel one bead of sweat roll down my arm. As soon as I walked into his office, Gary Nardino bellowed, "What the fuck did you do? Cindy Williams quit the show last night." Immediately, I was sweating bullets. Nardino began to tell me how he believed that somehow this was all my fault, and I should have been listening. I shouldn't have been thinking about how I was going to tell my wife that our lives were about to turn to shit, but make it funny. No, I should have been thinking about showrunner rule number 1. No matter what happens, no matter how crazy it gets, you don't shut it down. The show must go on. But the show was Laverne and Shirley, and all the scripts we had prepared featured Laverne and Shirley. If I wasn't going to shut it down, somehow in less than 24 hours, I had to come up with a script that featured just Laverne. A season that was already the season from hell was about to get worse, and I wasn't even supposed to be there. In 1982, there was no caller ID, and if you had a cell phone, it's probably the size of a shoebox, and none of us had realized yet that all telemarketers should be shot at dawn. So, when the phone rang, you'd answer it. "Hi, Mark, it's Penny." I would recognize Penny Marshall's line anywhere, because we worked together. Starting in 1978, and for 2.5 seasons, she was Laverne, and I was a writer on Laverne and Shirley. I started as a story editor and worked my way up to showrunner as one after another my predecessors got fired for various reasons. But I was never fired. I left the show when the studio asked me to write and produce a pilot for a show called Working Stiffs. I was one of the rare few who had survived Laverne and Shirley. On the phone, Penny told me that the studio had asked her to direct her first feature film, The Joy of Sex. And there was a really funny script, but the story was a mess. It needed a lot of work. And Penny asked me, she told me actually, that she was going to hire me to do a rewrite. I was going to be in the movie business, which a lot of people think is a step up from working in television. I was thinking, all right, nice job. Spirit guides. I got to tell you something that I don't usually tell people. I have spirit guides. I learned about them a few years earlier when I was having a past life reading done. Now, I don't really believe in past life readings. Whenever you hear about somebody's past life reading, everything was always ice cream and cake. They were either a Maharaja or a Maharini. You never hear that anybody was shoveling shit during the Inquisition. But a good friend swore that this past life reader was the best, and he wasn't going to stop bugging me till I went. Well, this woman got right to the name dropping, said I was good friends with Benjamin Franklin. And then she said, I was a very old soul that had lived in ancient Egypt, and that I knew Moses And she was quite sure that I was the guy who invented matzah. So evidently, I told Moses that I knew a way that he could lead hundreds of thousands of Jews through the desert for 40 years and no one would have a decent bowel movement. Obviously, he loved the idea. Well, none of this was bolstering my opinion of past life readings, but then the woman apologized to me. She said she wasn't seeing something from my past. She was seeing something right then and there, and that I was surrounded by three ascended masters who were my spirit guides, and they were looking out for my life and my career. And for some reason, that made some sense to me, because I've always said I don't write the jokes. I just get to read them first. I don't know where the jokes come from. Are jokes a gift from God, from a muse, from ascended master spirit guides? Maybe. I mean, that makes as much sense as anything else. And now if they were getting me into the movie business, they were doing a good job. Well, then Penny told me that she still had to do another season of Laverne and Shirley, and she was worried that we wouldn't have enough time together to work on the movie script. So she asked me to come back to Laverne and Shirley as the showrunner so that we could spend a lot of time together. Okay, we've got to take a minute and do a little TV 101 here. As a showrunner, kind of like a head football coach, I'm responsible for all aspects of the show. So I don't design the sets, but the set designers show me what they want to do, and it's the same with costumes. I don't edit the show, but I watch every cut with the editor and give my notes. But my main responsibility is the writing. I'm the head writer. So I decide what stories we're going to tell and who's going to write those stories. I decide if my joke is funnier than your joke, and hopefully I'm smart enough to know that when your joke is funnier than my joke. Typical TV season is 22 episodes, which means that we are going to conceive and write and cast and shoot and edit and deliver the equivalent of about 4.5 feature films in only 9 months. It can be grueling. So normally we'll shoot 3 or 4 episodes in a row and then take a week off. Well, the actors take a week off because, well, the actors get tired. But the writers desperately need that week to catch up on their writing and their sleep. And that's a normal season. What Penny Marshall didn't tell me until after I said I would take the job was this was not going to be a normal season. Because Penny had to prep the movie and because Cindy Williams was pregnant and knew when her baby was due, we weren't going to have to shoot all 22 shows in 22 weeks. And even though Penny and Cindy had to be in all 22 of those episodes, they were only going to be available for 18 of those weeks. It was not ideal for producing great work. And I should have said no right away. But lacking the artistic integrity and the financial stability to say no to the deal, I said, sure, let's do it. Well, right away, first week, problems. Because Cindy was pregnant and looked pregnant, we decided that she would marry some military guy who was based who knows where. But Cindy didn't want anybody to see the face of who she was marrying. Now, I was worried that our fans who had cared about these characters for 7 years would feel emotionally cheated not seeing Shirley's big wedding. But Cindy was the star of the show. So we said that her soldier husband had some weird tropical disease, and we wrapped him from head to foot in bandages. And Shirley was going to be the mummy's bride. And because she was pregnant, she really couldn't do the physical comedy that was the hallmark of the show. But somehow we got through that episode and the next 4, but none of them were great, and everybody was frustrated. But it wasn't until after we finished episode 6 that I was in front of Gary Nardino and Tony Thermopoulos, the president of ABC, and Gary Marshall, yes, the Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, Gary Marshall. And they were taking turns telling me how somehow this mess was my mess. Basically, I was screwed. But fortunately, I had 2 other thoughts. One, oh, way to go, Ascended Master Spirit Guides. This is the way you're taking care of my life and my career. And by the way, when you're dealing with the spirit world, there's no accountability. It sucks. But the other thought was there any way I could fix the script we had? If we could save enough of it, we could live to fight another day. And that's when I thought about when I had cast a monkey earlier in the day. Yeah, when you work on a show like Laverne and Shirley, you get to cast monkeys and horses and dogs. And, back then, No one had even heard the term animal rights. So, roller skating bears and elephants in tutus dancing on their hind legs and lions jumping through fiery hoops, we assumed that all animals wanted to be in show business. Why wouldn't they? So, when I said I needed a monkey who could smoke cigars and play cards with Laverne's father, casting director found Bobo, a chimpanzee who could do it all. Nardina was telling me just what my career was about to look like when it hit me. If Laverne could be in that same poker game, and she'd be alone because Shirley was off with her husband for a few days, and she was happy for Shirley for getting married, but she was just starting to realize that this friend, this best friend, this friendship that went on forever, it was going to change. It was never going to be the same, and that was making her sad. And that's when Bobo would put his arm around her and give Laverne a kiss on the cheek. We might have a great scene. And we also might have a scene that would establish Laverne on her own, just in case the show wasn't going to be Laverne and Shirley, it was going to be Laverne and nobody. Well, Nardina was saying something about my children and my children's children, and I interrupted and said, guys, I think I have a fix for this week's show, but if I don't get back to the office, we may not have a script for tomorrow. As I left the office, each of them was saying, and don't you dare shut it down. Well, Cindy Williams never did come back to the show, and we did shoot all 22 episodes, and I never did shut it down. Why would I? Because no matter what problems you're facing in life, you just have to remember that the show must go on. It's showrunner rule number 1.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. That's great. And next up, we have coming to us from Honolulu, Hawaii. It is Lisa Leong. Lisa joined this class to develop her voice and face her fear of public speaking. She's done a magnificent job of it. And this is the story that she's going to tell about a pivotal moment in her life. This is Lisa Leong.
Do you remember where you were when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded? Or when COVID lockdown started? These are times when something unimaginable occurred. We remember them because those events changed us. For me, I just moved to New York City 2 weeks prior from Hawaii. That's a 5,000-mile move. I was in my graduate apartment in graduate housing with a roommate I just met. I was sound asleep, wrapped in my blankets, when my roommate's cell phone rang. It was her mom calling in a panic. In a state of utter confusion, we ran up to the rooftop of our building, looked up, and saw a sight we will never forget. The first tower burning. It was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. We didn't have a landline, television, or internet. Without details readily available, we just stood there. I stared at the thick, dark, gray smoke taking over the entire sky, thinking, how could a plane miss seeing the enormous tower? I assumed it was a small aircraft, and then quickly learned it was a commercial plane. Wait, what is happening? Someone intentionally flew an airplane full of people into a tower full of people? Why is this happening? My stomach drops, my heart races, and my vision narrows, forcing me to hunch over my hands over my knees. You know when something devastating happens and it's as if time stood still for you? It's like everyone around you is moving at normal speed, and for you, complete standstill. It was like that, except for everyone. After the shock and dismay, the only thing I could think about was getting to Baruch College. On Tuesday mornings, I taught a freshman seminar course, and I knew my students were already on their way. I quickly left the rooftop, started to walk as fast as I could, and then ran. In our classroom, we huddled together, fixated on the news, trying to reach their loved ones who worked at the World Trade Center. By then, the towers collapsed, so phones were down and we could not get through. While I don't remember the rest of the day, I will always remember hearing my mom's voice. My sister, who lives in Portland, Oregon, heard the news first. I woke up my mom in Hawaii. More than half the day was gone by the time I was able to reach her. And by then, she was sobbing uncontrollably. I could feel her relief and her breath starting to settle after an emotional roller coaster of not knowing how I was affected by the day's events. Only now, as a mom, can I fully relate and understand how my mom was feeling. The attacks killed 3,000 people and impacted countless others. The day after, the wind shifted, bringing the smells and ash all over the city. I contemplated whether I should pack up and move back home. There was chaos and confusion for people questioning if other attacks were imminent to bomb threat evacuations. I remember questioning everything. What am I doing so far from home and those that I love? Do I really need to be here? I lived in a prime target location across from the 24-hour post office, kitty corner to Madison Square Garden, and 3 blocks from the Empire State Building. Evacuations from anthrax scares continued regularly. I still remember the shiver up my spine from the wind chill channeling through the skyscrapers while waiting for the all clear. I decided to stay put. I passed the Armory on my way to Baruch College. The red bricks of the Armory were completely covered with hundreds of white flyers. At the top of each paper, in big bold letters, was, "Have you seen? MISSING." There are countless pictures of mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, daughters, sons, friends, loved ones, all missing. There are makeshift memorials lining the bottom of the Armory with flowers and teddy bears. You see, the Armory was the Family Assistance Center. Relatives of loved ones missing would make their way there with photos and dental records in hand. Back in my apartment, I'd hear the loud piercing sirens. I actually found them comforting. It reminded me of the bravery being outpoured in a time when everything else was in limbo. Sirens would signal shift changes for the many courageous first responders helping at ground zero. As the sirens blare, everyone turns to face the street. An eruption of applause echoes as everyone stands and cheers until the entire caravan passes through. The mother tending to her toddler picks her up and they wave together. An elderly man waiting for the bus stops waits without hesitation or words, stands up and vigorously claps. Apartment windows open with shouts of cheer, and "We will never forget." In the year that followed, I made a point to say yes to every opportunity. The friends I made and reconnected with became my family. In 2002, at a party that I almost didn't go to, I met my future husband, Darren. In 2004, I returned to where I started my New York City journey. Darren and I moved in together, and I found myself once again on the same block as in 2001. I was across from the 24-hour post office, kitty corner to Madison Square Garden, and 3 blocks from the Empire State Building. On a crystal clear day, our large glass windows displayed the majestic view of Lower Manhattan, from the Statue of Liberty to 32nd Street. And on the anniversaries of 9/11, we'd sit there, mesmerized by the tribute of lights, the 2 beams of white lights 4 miles tall, seen from up to 60 miles, in the ghostly outline of where the Twin Towers once stood. In 2006, before I moved back home to Hawaii, I went to a corner bodega and carefully scanned the flowers lining the street. I bought the brightest and freshest bouquet of red roses that I could find. With them in my arms, I made my way to ground zero. A permanent memorial not yet there, I placed the roses down and stood in silent prayer of peace and hope. I haven't returned to New York City in over a decade. I've yet to see the permanent memorial. I never would have thought me, a girl who grew up in Kauai to sounds of roosters and cows, would fall in love with a big city and its people. New York City embraces and accepts everyone as soon as you step off the plane, train, or bus. There is no trial period. You are a New Yorker. That was empowering. After September 11th, that sense of New York pride was stronger than ever. Part of our attire, without question, was a red, white, and blue flag or New York Strong pin. Today, hanging in my home is a picture of the Manhattan skyline with the 2 beams of light where the World Trade Center once stood. Darren and I now have 2 daughters. The eldest is Chelsea, named after our neighborhood and time in New York. September 11th changed me. It changed my outlook on life and shaped me as a person. It's hard to believe that in 3 months, it will be the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I'm going to, as I did on the first anniversary, have a moment of silence and say a prayer. How will you remember?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Next up, we have Gail Trotter, and Gail has studied improv for many years at Second City in her native Chicago. She had a career in advertising before moving to New Mexico, where she currently lives, writes, teaches, and performs. This is Gail Trotter.
I was 6 years old, and the thing I hated more than anything else in the world was being made to look at myself in the mirror. Shoulders back like this. Stomach in, Gail. Stomach in. Good. Now, keep your knees together. My mom was famous in our neighborhood for having been a model and for still having a stunning figure. People called her a real looker. I just thought she was perfect. And I had a lot to learn, a whole lot to learn about what I'm supposed to do if I'm going to grow up and look like her. We were standing in front of the full-length mirror my parents had on the back of the door in their bedroom. Pretend there's a string at the top of your head, Gail, pulling you straight up like this. Like this, Gail. See? Do you see? Having poise and good posture was necessary. I knew that because without it, I would never turn into a young lady and be able to start making casseroles. But I already knew that there was no way I was going to get there. I mean, not when so much of me was just out of control, growing in all the wrong directions. The yellow chiffon dress I loved that we bought for me to wear to my Uncle Artie's wedding, it was just too bad if now I couldn't fit into it because there was no money to keep buying me bigger sizes. The time was now to stop being what my dad called pleasingly plump. And keep the hair out of your eyes, Gail. No one had better hair than my mom. Every Saturday, my dad would drive her to the beauty shop to get it turned blonde with waves running through it. And her hair, it never, ever moved. Her hair just stood there on her head like the most beautiful helmet ever. Maybe if Hattie gives you a manicure, that will stop you from biting your nails down to the bone. My mom's beauty shop was called Tempo Coiffure. The idea of going there gave me nightmares. There would probably be mirrors. The next Saturday, when we got there, I went inside, but I was 100% refusing to look at anything that was not on the ground. But right away, I saw big pink and black squares with glitter in them. And that was on the floor. And the noise was so noisy. I just had to look up. Whoa. Ladies were everywhere drinking coffee and looking at magazines and talking all at once, and some were laughing. Water was just gushing on and off from these big red shampoo bowls. Hairdryer ladies kept asking, "Am I dry?" And cans of Aquanet would not stop going psst, psst, and leaving choking clouds of hairspray just hanging in the air. You could barely hear the music between all that stuff. Everybody loves somebody sometime. Plus, wallpaper that was paisley. And for lamps, they had gold-colored globes just hanging down from the ceiling. There was even a twisty staircase right in the middle of the main room. And if you ran up the stairs, which I did a whole bunch of times, there was a pop machine there. with grape and orange Fanta and Sprite. Sprite had a little fairy on the bottle. But the best part, the special chair where you could practically lay all the way down and let somebody else wash your own face. Whoa. No wonder my mom liked coming here. It was like a teenager's secret room just exploded. There was so much going on. I knew this was the greatest place in the world. And I couldn't believe I was lucky enough to see everything. And for about 5 minutes, I wanted to stay there forever. I don't have anything to do. I tugged on the bottom of my mom's black cape. Jorgen was my mom's stylist. He was holding purple clips in his mouth and pulling on my mom's hair so hard around these curlers. The curlers were metal and they looked exactly like barbed wire. Ew. I don't have anything to do. Well, watch what Jorgen does so you can learn how to do your hair, Gail. I don't have anything to do. Gail, please, you'll just have to find something. Just then, I felt a big paw come down around my shoulders, and I heard this lady say, "Come, you come sit with me, yeah? You draw a nice flower for me, okay? Okay, come." Whoever this lady was, she took my crayons and construction paper, and she walked away. And my mom said, "Thank you, Mrs. Teichman." I knew exactly where the smell was coming from. Mrs. Teichman was the only lady I ever saw in my whole life who had a mustache. Tiny black hairs were just poking out from this goo smeared all over her upper lip. It smelled like oven cleaner, and it made my eyes sting. Why does she have that? I asked my mom. Shh. No, but why is it there, Mom? Shh. You're not supposed to ask that, Gail. Well, how come? Because it isn't nice. Well, how come it isn't nice? Shh. I just told you, Gail. Shh. No, but I mean, why? Why does she have a mustache? Shh. Gail, Sephardic. All right, now go. My mom waved me away. I ran to catch up with Mrs. Teichman, who was on her way in the back towards the processing room. Super fartic. I did not know what that word meant, but I did not want to catch that when I grew up. It was sunny in the processing room from all the windows. There were 2 rows of just these long bunches of green vinyl chairs, and they were facing each other. Whoa, wall to wall grandmas, just sitting there like ducks, waiting to get their hair rinsed. They saw me right away. Where is the schöne Kenel Mendel? Ooh, I want the dolly, come here. To Land von Gott, a Brücke auf der Welt. Ooh. The grandmas were so happy to see me, and they didn't even know who I was. One of them scooped me up like a bird and passed me around to nest on lap after lap after lap. All these grandmas had monster-sized bosoms and wrinkles all over their faces, and some of them even had flappy wings shaking underneath their arms. Cool. Being scared of them went away really quick, probably because they were powdery and they smelled sweet like marshmallows. Where you get such curls in your hair, huh? Like a peach. That face like a peach. Diese Leben allang uns ein gesunde, mildgute, wackelte Levin. They asked me questions and they laughed at my answers, and it was okay. And one pretended to get my nose, and the other one tickled me, and another one tried to give me a bite of her onion and butter sandwich. The grandma on the end though, the one in the violet colored dress, I could not stop staring at her. She held a handkerchief to her eyes and she just kept looking out the window, looking away from me, looking at nothing. Toombala, 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 laika, toombala, 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 laika. One of the grandmas started singing and another one took my hands and helped me to clap along. I know how to clap. Squirming off whatever lap I was on, I jumped into the middle of the floor. I have a song too. I have a song too. Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Oh, sing, yes, please. Sing my song. Yes, go singen schneidig dann nicht tracht. What? Let us hear, Dolly. Okay, sing, sing. Okay, okay. Dankeschön, oh my darling. Dankeschön, Baba da had Buddha chain, my darling. Dankeschön, and shame. And then I did a curtsy. The grandmas raced each other to snap their purses open and dig around in their pockets. And I got a butterscotch candy, a magic marker, a dime, a whole pack of Clorox gum, tweezers, a little pearl button that my mom said was fake, a whole row of S&H green stamps, and an all-white headband that stretched. It was velvet. Ooh. After that day, I started asking my mom if I could go with her again, and pretty soon I was a beauty shop regular. I knew all of the grandma's names. Mrs. Mandelbaum, Mrs. Schneider, Mrs. Katz, Mrs. Rabinowitz, Mrs. Goldfein, Mrs. Fine, Mrs. Friedman, the other Mrs. Friedman, Mrs. Taub, Mrs. Avram, and about 100 million more. Some of their first names I even knew. Rivka, Anushka, and Hortense. The other thing I knew, because when we were home and I was supposed to be in my room asleep and not listening to my parents talk quietly in the kitchen, was that almost all of the grandmas had gone to camp. My mom was telling my dad about it. Mrs. Gottlieb couldn't find her daughter when she came back from camp. And some of the husbands, after camp was over, they were just gone for good. I didn't understand. How could they get lost forever? Maybe they just walked too far away from their houses. They weren't looking where they were going, and now they were stuck on the other side of the highway, waiting to cross the street. I thought for sure my dad would say he would go find them because he took care of everything. But all my dad did was look down and shake his head. When I went to bed that night, I kept thinking about camp. I pictured Mrs. Gottlieb crowded into a bathing suit, looking like a balloon about to pop, gently paddling her canoe along the river. On the hottest day of summer, the air conditioner broke in the beauty salon, and that put everyone in the salon in a permanent bad mood. Grandmas took out these small accordion-shaped fans from their purses. And grandmas who didn't have fans, they just waved newspapers in front of their faces and went, "Hey, hey." On the floor with my crayons and paper, I looked up just at the right time to see Mrs. Teichman push the sleeves of her blouse all the way up her arms. And that's when I saw it. Her birthmark. It was dark blue. I had to turn my head almost all the way upside down to see the numbers right so that I could copy them with my crayon. 1, 7, 3, 2, 3, 5. Then I drew a bright red heart around the numbers and I signed my name at the bottom of the paper. And then I folded it up like a card and I gave it to Mrs. Teichman. And she said, "Oh, darling, is this for me? What did you do? Oh, look what she did. Oh, let me see, let me see." She opened the card slowly, And then something about her just emptied out. Her smile went away. I waited for her to say something. I stood there and I waited for her to say something. Did I mess this up? I thought. Well, something I did, but I didn't know what was pretty bad. My face started to feel hot. My face started to quiver. Mrs. Teichman bent forward towards me and she held my face in both of her hands. She rubbed my crying away with her thumbs. Thank you. This is very special gift. I love. And now you listen to me. You are special gift. Today, morgen, tomorrow, always. You be happy. Eh? You always be happy one. Okay? Stopped crying. She delivered a greasy red lipstick kiss right to my forehead. It stayed there most of the day. While she whispered in my ear, I traced the numbers on her arm softly with my finger.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Gail, for that story. Thanks for that share. That was wonderful. Next up, and certainly a big finish to our whole thing, is Scott McGregor. Scott has a PhD in business, and yet he still has trouble minding his own. He lives in rural Wales and still not sure how he got there. This is Scott McGregor.
Thank you. Thank you. I have something very serious to talk to you about today. It was long ago, 20 years ago, when I heard the song, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. We flash forward a few years later, and I'm on the corner of University and 13th in Gainesville, Florida, chanting with my arms raised up in the air, sweat falling down from a typical Florida muggy afternoon. Cars are driving by, some are cheering with us, some are saying, get a job. And I was so happy. It was a joy just to be able to perform the chanting in public and give that to people. And at that time, I was a brahmachari. Brahmachari means a celibate monk in the Hare Krishna movement. And they're like the Navy SEALs of the Hare Krishnas. It's like everyone was respected, you know, as being part of the army, part of the team. But if you had a house and a job and a car and a bed that didn't have nails in it, then you're kind of not a serious practitioner like the brahmacharis were. So yeah, being celibate for 7 years was an artificial imposition on who I am as a person, but because I was serious about my spiritual life, I followed that line. And at some point, it became time for me to recognize the truth of the matter. And that was a difficult transition. It was a transition that required me to admit my frailties, my limitations. There's a sense that I was letting my guru down, my teacher down. So like I was doing something wrong. Like why couldn't I find full satisfaction through the chanting of God's names that fulfilled every essence of my being? Why do I still hanker after relationship? So I got over that because the truth was I did want to be in relationship and I was afraid of it. I was afraid of the vulnerability that it meant, afraid of how my life would change. And it did change. It changed for the better. It was so exciting. I started dating in Hare Krishna. There's this rule of dating. So there's an arrangement. And I was seeing someone who now lived outside the temple, but she formerly lived in the temple. So I knew her for quite a few years. And I held her hand, and it was just such an exciting thing after 7 years of not holding a woman's hand. And then later became a kiss, and gradually it moved into PG-13 activity. It was so exciting for me. I just felt a spring in my step and such a joy, and like, this wasn't so bad. I should have done this a long time ago. And that balloon of enthusiasm, that joy, that excitement, it was just as if someone poked a pin in it when her friend told me, you know that she's still sleeping with her old boyfriend. No, what? And so the sadness, gave way to anger, and the anger gave way to blaming her. And I started getting people in the temple to be on my side and telling them, oh, can you believe she did this to me? How could she do that? So I was really in my place of closed off fear, anger, sadness, when at the end of the day she called. And I remember answering the phone, sitting in the little office I had, and listening to her say, I know what you're feeling right now. Please just listen. And I knew that word, just listen, was important. That if someone asks me to listen and I don't give that to them, then there's something wrong with me. So I postponed, I set aside my anger for a moment, and I listened. And as she started telling me of her life that I didn't know about, how she grew up in a family where sex was taboo, and where she later joined a religion where sex was taboo, and then she married a man who didn't want to have sex with her. And then after that marriage ended, she started dating this guy that she was now sleeping with. And as she explained what happened and how she was trying to understand her own sexuality and break free from her own social norms, I felt this understanding, this openness that, wow, there's no decisions that you've made that I would make differently. I would do all the same things you've done. And in that, I saw that she didn't do something wrong to me. And my story of betrayal, this harsh picture of betrayal, just started to disintegrate. And like the pixels fell to the ground. And I could see that, oh my gosh, this person that I was so hurt by didn't do anything to hurt me. And my heart started to beat normally again, and I felt an openness. And as I listened to her more, the disintegration didn't stop there. And it was like people from my past who had hurt my feelings, whether it was in relationship of betrayal or father not giving me the attention that I wanted. It was like, wow, they were all doing their best at that time. And there's no one that's ever hurt me in life. And the realization from that was so freeing. It was so happy. And we made an agreement that we talk, go for a walk sometime later. But when I think about that experience, it was such a drastic change from being locked down to being free. And it stays with me to this day, that anytime I start to get into like a poor me state, like, oh, how come my boss doesn't listen to me more? I can remember that instance and remember that maybe I should step into their world for a moment before I start judging them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. That's wonderful. Everybody, this is, you can tell from this array of stories that were in the program this afternoon, just what I've always said, which is that there's so much extraordinary in the ordinary life. And I love that you all were so courageous to come forward and tell these beautiful stories. And I love you in the audience for being here to witness this, to be the other side of that connection, to create that circuit like that. Thank you so much for being a part of this. This has been a fantastic experience. I know for me, I think for everyone involved, and I hope that you'll keep it up, keep telling those stories, because there is such a great amount of power in your sharing your experience with others. You now know how to do it, so I hope you'll keep it all up. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Let's give everybody a big silent applause, jazz hands for this amazing thing, this contribution that everyone made today. And to all the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Bye.